So first, I want to introduce you to Ames Simmons. He is a senior fellow at Duke School of Law, and I feel important just saying it. So I know that I just love that title. And Ames is no stranger to North Dakota. He was here in October for the state LGBTQIA summit, so some of you may have met him then. And I know he's working with our North Dakota Human Rights Commission too. So welcome, Ames. Want to just say hello? You
Hey
get out there that
y'all, glad to be here. I'm excited about a lounge and learn. Hoping that I can be like, can lawyers be lounge lizards? I'm gonna try. I took off my coat and tie, so here we go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can all be lounge lizards. I love it. I hope everyone is lounging comfortably for this. It's evening. We should all lounge. Um, so thanks, Ames. We're excited to hear from you. Our second presenter is Michelle Gayette, and many of you may know Michelle. She's the Assistant Director of Adult and Aging Services in North Dakota and a really incredible advocate for this community as well as many others. So welcome, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me. I see a lot of familiar faces. I'm happy to see you all again.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you here. All right, so now that's it. That's all you're going to hear from me. I'm going to hand the next portion of this off to Ames, who is going to share his wisdom, and then we'll move on to Michelle, and then we'll take some questions. And remember, if you have any questions as we go, just put them in the chat and enjoy. Thank you.
Okay, hello y'all. I'm really excited to be with you. And as always, I'm hoping that my PowerPoint actually works. So y'all bear with me. Can y'all see a big blue screen? I hope you can. All right, good. Like Marnie said, my name is Ames and my pronouns are he and him. I am a queer white transgender guy over age 50. That's as much as I'm going to tell you about my age, but I will tell you that I joined AARP the day that I turned 50 because the discounts, y'all, and all the support that you get. But oh my God. So I'm excited to talk to you today. Advance the slides. So what we're going to be talking about is advanced care planning, and in particular, thinking about how transgender and non-binary people might need to take into account certain considerations about advanced care planning and do that earlier in the life cycle. A lot of this research also applies to LGBTQ people, so I'll try to point that out as we go along. One slide for the entire evidence base. I will say briefly that based on this study that was done in Florida based on administrative data, so that means insurance claims, the authors of one study found out that trans people had 2 to 3 times as many Alzheimer's disease risk factors. And this is all emerging evidence. So the studies that I'm talking about came out in like 2022 and 2023. So don't let this slide fool you that there's like a huge, well-established practice around caring for older adults who are trans and non-binary. But what we do know gives me concern as a lawyer about things that I can do to help people. Another study showed that trans people of color report more or more frequent confusion or memory loss at about 1.5 times the rates that white transgender people report those things, and higher rates than all cisgender people. So cisgender people are folks who are not trans, people whose gender identity is the same as the sex that they were assigned at birth. So we definitely know that not only are transgender people at higher risk, in particular, trans people of color are at even more significant risk. So for some transgender people, we don't know that much about how gender identity and cognitive changes work together. This is something that we need a lot more study about. But these emerging data show that dementia may cause people to feel more gender fluidity than they did before. If they didn't experience any gender fluidity at all, this might be a new thing that they're experiencing. So doctors, folks who are caregivers, whether that's, our family members or whether it's our chosen family, might not know what to do when somebody is experiencing these cognitive changes. Should they like correct the person, like remind them that, remember you went through this whole gender transition thing? Or is it better to affirm the person as they are that day? These are not settled questions. They're things that we need more research about. But what we do know pretty clearly is that trans people are afraid that we will be mistreated in places like nursing homes, and where we are afraid that our gender identity will not be affirmed in places like long-term care facilities. So there's a lot of fear that comes with getting older, as it does for, most people. But these are concerns about whether your gender identity will be respected are not typically fears that folks who are not trans or non-binary necessarily have to worry about. And in fact, trans people of color were twice as likely to report these fears compared to white trans people. So there's all the same good old, white supremacy and racism is at work in thinking about and talking about aging, the same as it is in, every other part of our society right now. Trans people report that their biggest worry is that these cognitive changes will mean losing control over our gender identity. Like right now, I can make sure that I'm dressed in a way that is typically masculine. I can make sure that people are calling me by the correct name. I can make sure people are calling me by the correct pronouns. And I don't know whether I don't know what's going to happen if I begin experiencing cognitive changes, if I will still have that same control or not. So, as we say, when you are a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So there are many different tools that we can bring to bear on this situation that I'm highlighting for you, because I'm an attorney. The tool that I thought of is a legal tool. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about. But again, there are lots of different ways and community-based solutions that we can bring to bear here. So we're going to talk about advanced directives. Some of you may already know about advanced directives. AARP has done a lot of work around, sometimes you hear this called advanced care planning. And I know the Adult and Aging Services Division has also done a lot of awareness raising around these. But just so we're all on the same page, advanced directives are documents that tell providers what medical treatment you would want if you are unable to tell your caregiver or your healthcare provider yourself. So my idea was that I could put together an advance directive that talks about how a trans or non-binary person wants their gender identity to be affirmed. And that can help to give care providers some guidance about how the trans person wants to be treated. If I'm unable to tell them myself, I'll at least know that this document exists and that it will give them some guidance. It also gives me peace of mind, but important for me to say that advanced directives have been around for decades, and these documents were not crafted to stop discrimination, but they may help to prevent mistreatment in healthcare by long-term care providers, personal care assistants, or even by family members who may not be affirming of the person's gender identity, which is, just another fear that keeps me awake. So let me you may have already walked through the scenario in your head, but if you haven't, I hope I'm not giving you something additional to worry about. Generally speaking, if you do not have an advance directive, or you have one but it is not available because it is like, say, under a pile of newspapers in a basket, which is where my father's was, without advance directives, care providers are going to go by generally by whatever the next of kin says. And that is usually specified in each state, these default decision makers for healthcare. Some states are beginning to include chosen family in those hierarchies, but they're always last. They always come after spouse, parents, children, aunt, niece, many other people. And many of those people may not be accepting of the person's gender identity. So this is not theoretical. Like, this comes up in the literature that I've read, that unsupportive family members might try to take charge of medical decision making in a way that doesn't show respect for the person's gender identity. And if you are a care provider and you otherwise kind of aren't sure what to do with a transgender person, you might, like, somebody who's a family member who tells you what to do might seem like a really attractive option when you otherwise have no idea. So caregivers may be even persuaded by non-affirming family members that the person is not actually transgender. Sometimes they might say things like, all this, thinking that their gender identity is different is just a symptom of psychosis, like they're not in touch with reality, or a symptom of cognitive changes. There can be lots of reasons that trans people don't have advance directives. There are lots of reasons why many people do not have advance directives. And I count myself as a fan of Michelle's and trying to get the word out about how important advance directives are for everyone. There may be some real particular reasons for trans people that have shown up in research. And some of these are hard for me to say and might be hard to hear. There are some philosophical reasons, like people who transitioned later in life. So right now, that's going to, a lot of people who are trans, who are over age 50, probably transitioned later in life, because, the transgender tipping point when Laverne Cox was on the cover of Time magazine, that was only 10 years ago. People who recently completed a transition may really be focused on hope and, like, the feeling of a new life in their affirmed gender identity and all the things that they wanted, that they haven't been able to experience in their affirmed gender. They may not want to focus on what we think of as end of life issues. And some trans people said that they simply never imagined that they would actually live long enough to grow old. The LGBTQ community generally, there's a lot of health disparities that make us sicker than a lot of people earlier, because of the discrimination that we have to deal with as part of our society. And trans people are certainly not exempt from that. So it may just be like an inability to kind of, like, see past age 35. There can also be really practical reasons. Trans people are disproportionately likely to be unemployed, to be experiencing homelessness. So if you don't have food, shelter, your kind of basic life necessities for the night, that might very well seem like a more pressing issue than going and talking to a lawyer who's going to cost money, about something that's kind of hard to understand.
Yeah.
Also, many trans people may not be able to readily identify someone that will be able to serve as their healthcare agent. So it's a good idea to have a statement about your treatment preferences, but you also really need to also have a healthcare agent or a healthcare power of attorney. These documents are called different things in different places, um, to help make sure that things that you put in those treatment preferences are followed by the care providers that are around you. And we know that for LGBTQ people generally, that our social networks are thinner and that they get even more thinner as we age, because we're more likely to experience social isolation. And again, my hat is off to AARP for letting us all lounge and learn together. This is one way that we can help keep those social connections strong. But it just may not be something that trans people have access to. So yeah, if you haven't gotten the message so far, I hope that you carry away from this that advanced directives are for everyone. We often think of cognitive changes, of planning for those changes as something only older people have to deal with. And we often talk about advanced directives as end of life planning, because that's really how these documents originated. I can't tell you how many times I get ready to give this presentation and somebody says, you need to take this to a palliative care organization or to a hospice, which is true. Like, they do need this information, but it's definitely has broader and wider applicability than end of life. For example, you might be unconscious after a bad accident, or maybe you suffered an assault or some kind of violence. We know that trans people certainly are more likely to experience violence. We might be having a mental health crisis. We know that calls to mental health crisis lines have increased over the last, we'll just call it the last few months, as folks are being exposed to news headlines that are hard to read about trans and non-binary people. Or we might have some other kind of serious illness or traumatic brain injury, anything that could affect our thinking and memory. These are all good situations that you might encounter anytime, that an advanced directive can help you with if you're age 18 or over. So I'm glad to tell you that SAGE and Transgender Law Center have this new resource, Planning for Lifelong Care. There's a lot of words in the title, because lawyers. Planning for Lifelong Care, guiding questions for transgender and non-binary people to plan for dementia and serious illness. And yeah, you will have the links to all of this. This guide helps you think through what are your values around gender identity, what are your values around cognitive change, how do you think about like what makes a good life for you, and tries to help trans and non-binary people figure out if there's special language that might be worth adding to an advanced directive. These are not standalone documents. They definitely need to be pieced into a healthcare power of attorney, and could be called a statement of treatment preferences, could be called a living will. I don't like living will because often they only take effect if you are in some places it's called a persistent vegetative state. I think the disability community has convinced us not to use that language anymore. Helpfully, AARP maintains a directory of advanced directive forms by state. So these are not hard to find. You do not necessarily need to have a lawyer to fill out these forms, although you may need a notary. I know here in DC where I live, I had to have a notary and 2 witnesses who could not, neither one of them could be given any powers in my advance directive. And that was a challenge, trying to get all those people in one room together. So the idea here is that some trans people might feel reassured by sitting down and writing that they want their current identity to continue to be respected, and whatever gender affirming treatment they may be receiving to continue to be provided even after cognitive changes. Like, that to me gives me peace of mind that I think is important. But I've learned a lot in this research from non-binary people, from folks who are advocates in the disability community, that we need to also think about trans people who experience their gender identity in a more fluid way, that they may want to preserve that flexibility and not have it be seen as a symptom of dementia or psychosis or some other thing that might be wrong with you. You might be perfectly awesome and experiencing additional gender fluidity. The thing, the overarching principle that we want to use is autonomy and self-determination when we're thinking about helping our loved ones with completing advance directives. We know that advance directives are likely going to come into play sooner than end of life for many trans people. So we need to be thinking about them earlier in our life cycle, and we need to go back and revisit them periodically as our circumstances change. And this is, again, especially important for folks with thinner support networks. So I think this is a good intergenerational project. Older adults can be sharing their history and experience, their skills, with younger folks who can perhaps be willing to serve as older folks' healthcare agent, for example. Maybe not on the first date, as we say. Relationship building takes time, and that's why it's important to start earlier. I'll just give you a quick example of a guiding question here. I would feel less worried about dementia if I knew that people around me would have to follow my written directions about how to relate to me as a transgender person. So, depending on which of these feels right, I would want people to relate to me with my correct name and pronouns and continue any medical treatments, versus my gender identity is fluid and I would feel violated if anyone forced me to dress a certain way or be called by different pronouns than how I felt on that day. And then there are some people that this might not be decided enough. It might not resonate with people. And I wanted to preserve that option too, to make sure that we're still telling folks, even if you don't need any of this special language, that you should still complete an advance directive. I would be remiss if I did not also point out to y'all that an additional tool that we have, it's the Long-Term Care Equality Index is not advanced care planning itself. It is a tool that SAGE and Human Rights Campaign Foundation put together to try to help people find residential long-term care facilities in their area that have policies that are affirming of LGBTQ people. I encourage you to go and look at this report. There is a criterion related to advanced care planning that is in the LEI, the Long-Term Care Equality Index. I think it, at a minimum, can help spur some questions if you're looking at the possibility of residential long-term care facility. It may be able to give you some questions that would be helpful in figuring out where is a community where you're going to be affirmed in your identity. I will say, so this is only, we really only have had one iteration of the survey. It was in the summer of 2023. So this is really brand new. And there are we need more participation from residential long-term care facilities in North Dakota. So right now, if you went to the map and tried to look for affirming, or rather, I should say, long-term care facilities that have affirming policies, because it does not really measure the lived experience of people there, you would not find any for North Dakota. So any of you who are connected with long-term care facilities, please connect with me, and I would love to talk to them about why they should participate. This doesn't cost any money. And I'm on the National Advisory Council for the LEI. So I'm invested in its success, and also in making sure that it really is useful for people in our community, because the amount of tools that we have is not enough where we are today for the number of people who are aging. And that is the end of my presentation, and I will turn it back over to Marnie.
Well, thank you, Ames. That was really so much information, so much wonderful information. And I know we have a couple questions in the chat, but I think what we decide is we're going to hold, and I want to make sure that Michelle talks because a lot of this comes together. And so Ames talked to us about the advanced directives, kind of segued into a little bit about long-term care. And now we're going to turn to Michelle Gayette. And as noticed, she is the Assistant Director of Adult and Aging Services in North Dakota and the point person for the multi-generational plan on aging. And this project, it's no small deal. They're just simply working to transform the infrastructure and coordination of services for adults as they age in North Dakota. So if anybody can do it, Michelle can. I have great faith. And her work does affect us all. So Michelle, you take it away, and following that, we will get to questions. So thank you, everyone.
Sure.
And I'm
Well, my
so glad
goodness,
you're
I
all
hope I
here.
can live up to what you say, Marnie. Yes, so like Marnie said, I'm Michelle Gayette. My pronouns are she, hers. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about our multi-generational plan for aging, but specifically about how this ties into what Ames was talking about in terms of futures planning and why we specifically have a goal for that. Whoops, my slides went a little bit fast. So wanted to give you just a brief kind of introduction to what is an MPA, or a multi-generational plan is what we call it in North Dakota. So what we're doing is doing a strategic planning process, and we're hoping with that process to create and develop a living document. And it should be a 10-year document that can help us in North Dakota really transform what our infrastructure looks like and really look to coordinate services for individuals as they age. So we're really talking about across the lifespan. And that's where futures planning really plays in. I know Ames talked about it, Marnie talked about it, like really going back further, right? And talking to people younger to think about futures planning and doing their documents so that they have a voice when they don't have a voice anymore, or when they lose their voice. So what we're really hoping is that with this MPA, we're going to allow our stakeholders to have a clear vision and priorities. So when we all go and say, these are the needs of the people in North Dakota, all people in North Dakota, we're all singing from the same songbook. We're all sharing the same statistics. We're all sharing the same vision and end goal. And so that's really what we're trying to focus on with this MPA. It's hopeful that we'll use it to guide state and local programs with both public and private initiatives. We want some policies in place, and we want funding to support individuals as they age through the lifespan. Our goal has been this whole time to have input from communities, from stakeholders. We're going to have a survey coming out soon for those of you that may want to contribute that way in terms of what do you think about our plan and what do you think about our goals. Because I know sometimes meetings are a little bit hard for everyone, and we want to make sure that we're getting input from everyone. And then with that input, we want to make sure it goes into our plan. And so we have a lot of opportunities for input and feedback and participation as this plan rolls out. And of course, we're going to use data. Data is very important. So we're going to leverage the existing data and really set some benchmarks to kind of help show how we're making changes in North Dakota. So again, what this can do is we're hopeful it's going to build some bridges across government and stakeholder individuals, right? So we really want to start talking the same language with legislators as well. And we want collaboration with stakeholders. And so one of our first projects with this MPA was to really look at where in North Dakota are there stakeholders that talk about the aging space, right? And one of the coolest ones I think we brought on is our North Dakota Arts Council. If you don't know, they do a lot of stuff, really cool projects for individuals, for older adults. So check them out. They have won awards for what they've done in the aging space. And so that's one of our diverse stakeholders. We've got just a wide variety of stakeholders on our MPA group, and we have a lead group, and I'll kind of talk about who's on that. But really, again, those shared values, goals, and opportunities to improve that person-centered service and support. We want to really serve people where they want to be served and how they want to be served as they go across the lifespan. And I think the rest I've kind of touched on. So I really want to get to what progress we've made to date on this. We applied and were chosen by the Center for Healthcare Strategies to participate in a learning collaborative, and that was last year. And we were with 10 other states, and all the states are kind of in a different state of where they are with their MPA. Our next big goal is to write the first draft of the document. And so once we get our steering committees together, we're going to write a rough draft of that document and start really implementing what we want to do in North Dakota. Our lead group, and I'm missing one on here, we have individuals from the Alzheimer's Association, we have a legislator on our lead group, we have aging staff, adult and aging services, we have a representative from the governor's office, we have AARP, and we recently added the Long-Term Care Association, the director from the Long-Term Care Association. So we have quite a diverse group, and we're always looking to have more stakeholders join us. And if there's other individuals that think we should have them on the lead group, we certainly want to make sure we're having the voices heard. We did bi-monthly meetings with CHCS, and then we did monthly meetings, and we still do monthly meetings with our lead group to complete the required assignments, and then now really to put the document in place. We did some in-person meetings, right? We had 4 across the state. We continue to host lunch and learns, and we're actually going to host a lunch and learn on futures planning with our partner Legal Services of North Dakota. And so more to come on that, but looking for that to come later this year. We identified our 4 broad goals. We have a timeline. We have our website, and that is linked in here. And then we did host a meeting with the Red River Valley Rainbow Seniors, and I hear that went very well. I was unable to attend due to a funeral, but I know Jackie represented the aging services spectacularly, and we got a wealth of information from that group. And so we brought a lot back to share with our lead group from that meeting. And again, the survey then we'll send out here, hopefully to the Missouri River Valley Rainbow Seniors. So here are our 4 broad goals. And you can see they're really, they are really broad, and we're hoping to kind of add objectives and some measurements under each goal. So we're going to create some steering committees based on these. And so if any of these speak to you and you think, I really want to be one of the members on one of these steering committees, you can reach out to me. My contact information is going to be at the end of this. But what we're really trying to do, again, is make sure individuals have services where they want, when they want, and how they want. And so with our services closer to home, that's kind of been our goal for a long time in adult and aging services. We really want people to live in the setting of their choice with the support that they need to thrive as they age across the lifespan. And so currently in our programs, we serve individuals aged 15 to 101. So we are really serving individuals across the lifespan through aging services. And that's why we added adult and aging services. So we really speak better to who we serve through our programming. I'll touch on futures planning because that's the main one, so I'll come back to that one. Social engagement and accessibility. We want meaningful and inclusive engagement with family members, communities, and workplaces. And that's kind of where the North Dakota Council on Arts comes in, and they're going to do a pilot project with us, looking to target, I think, the Mott area, because Mott has quite an active group of individuals there, and I think they'd be the best place to pilot this art project that the North Dakota Council on Arts wants to do. And they also did 3 lunch and learns for us, and they are recorded, I believe, and on our website. And so if you're interested in watching any of those lunch and learns that we've had, you can go out to our website and see those. But they gave us a little grant to get really powerful movement and all sorts of really engaging activities through those 3 lunch and learns that they did. And so those are fabulous if you want to go check them out. Workforce. We really want to have ready access to quality services. So really expanding the workforce that provides care in the home, in those community settings, but also if older adults or individuals with disabilities would like to work and retain a job, how can we best support them through this plan as well? And so workforce is kind of 2-pronged there. But then the one we're here to kind of talk about is futures planning. And we really want that outreach and learning opportunities to discuss legal, financial, and healthcare planning. And like Ames has said, my goal is to get in front of anybody that will listen to me talk about futures planning. So I did speak to the HR, state HR group at a conference earlier or late last year, I guess, or early this year. And we really talked about when should you start thinking about doing these planning documents. We talked about, should we have them at time of hire? Should we talk about pre-retirement and at retirement to make sure that individuals have those documents in place and why it's so important to do so. And I kind of have a couple stories about that, personal stories, why this is so important to me. I have 2 adult children, and the minute they turned 18, I was on them to get these documents done because I had gone to a training and someone said, my child at the age of 18, right? Child, that's what we think of them, had a serious accident and needed somebody to step in and make decisions. And that child didn't have the POA healthcare directive. And the parent was kind of left floundering because they couldn't pay the bills, they couldn't do anything, and they had to look to do a guardianship over that adult child. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh my goodness, as a parent, you think you get to make those decisions for your children, right? But when they turn 18, they're an adult, and I have no legal authority to do so. And so my children, both my adult children, have POAs and healthcare directives, power of attorneys and healthcare directives in place, in files, filed with their doctors, right? We want to have that information out there for them. And the other side of that coin was my grandparents. The funeral I had last week was my grandfather. My grandfather passed at 96 just a couple weeks ago. But when we were talking about futures planning with them, it was almost too late to have that discussion, right? So Ames kind of talked about that, most people don't want to think about it at a certain age. And my grandparents didn't want to think about it when they needed them. And we were talking like at 80 with these kind of documents. And they were kind of like, I can't think about that. I don't want to think about death. To them, that meant death. So really, my focus is get these documents in place sooner and make sure that you have a voice throughout your lifespan. What your wishes are going to be heard throughout your lifespan. So here again, the importance of future planning, that this is really important to me. That voice is really important to me. So we're all just one accident away, like Ames said, from losing our voice, our ability to speak to what we want and what we want for our care. So really thinking about, as we're doing these documents, who do I want to provide my care? What do I want it to look like? Who do I want making my decisions, right? And that's kind of a tough thing to establish, I think. Where do I want to receive the care? I don't want to go to a nursing home. I want to receive the care in my home. Okay, so how do we start wrapping those services around an individual? And then here's a really big one, independence, right? How am I going to get around if I can no longer drive? These are things that you can really speak to in these documents and really make sure that those, when you're having discussions with family members or loved ones or your family of choice, that they know your wishes for these situations or for each of these dot points on the screen here. It ensures you're prepared. So the family members, if something were to happen to me, my wishes are written down, and my children, my adult children, don't have to think about what I would want, right? My wishes are written down. They can pull up my document and say, Mom wants XYZ in a situation like this. And there's no rushed decisions. I know they would still be emotional, but sometimes it really helps just to say, here's what she wrote, take it and go forth, and this is the care she would want. I can set my own goals and I can reach my goals. I could, for what I want, ensure some financial stability. I can live on my own terms. And I think that's what we all want, right? And I know Ames really touched on that. It was so powerful listening to what you were saying, Ames. Being able to live on your own terms, choosing the people that are going to care for you, choosing who's going to make your decisions, and then just knowing that all of your assets are protected with these documents. So again, I just wanted to point this out as we go across the lifespan, or if we have an accident and have some kind of disability or anything like that, these are the kind of services we kind of think about we might need. It could be that I need assistance with daily cares, right? Bathing. I may need help with medication or dressing. And so these are all the things that we can connect individuals to through adult and aging services. And again, it could be that it could be received in your own home. It could be in a skilled facility setting. We're really striving to keep people in their homes and communities longer. But I wanted this slide in here to kind of just really draw down on what kind of considerations and what are the things that you might need as you go through the aging process. And so here's the kind of link for if you want to participate in the existing survey. There is a specific survey coming out about each of the broad goals. So watch for that to come out. And as soon as I get it, Marnie, I'm going to send the link to you. I'm just We're just finalizing the document now. I got some really good feedback on it. And so hopefully by end of week, I'm going to have a final version of that survey. But if you want to provide input on our MPA and how you feel you align with those goals, this is the way to do it. Here's our contact information, but the most important contact information is mine. And I am more than willing to receive any phone calls, any questions, anything like that, helping to guide people to anything that I can do in the state of North Dakota. I would love to be an advocate. I did tell Alan and Barry that if any of you who live in the Bismarck area and want to speak to me individually versus a big meeting, I love coffee. I'm here for it. So I'm happy to have a meeting and hear your voices and make sure those voices are heard and put forth in our plan. And I think that's it for me, Marnie.
Well, that was some good stuff. So, thank you, Michelle. I think it's so neat when our the work that we do aligns. I mean, that's obviously a part of what this is and why we're all here together. But when Michelle talked about thriving as you age, that's one of the tenets of AARP, the work that we do. We want people to thrive as they age and to make those choices. And one of the things I was really struck by in listening to Michelle in particular is that it's hard and it's scary to talk about these things, but there's a lot of joy in it too, into like setting your wishes forth and letting people know what you want. There's joy and there's power in it too. And I think that that is really important in a world where we sometimes don't feel like we have um, the power or we are empowered. And so it's a good lens to look through. Now, that brings us, we have a couple questions in the chat, and I know everyone's been listening intently and being so wonderful. We've got some really good questions here, though, so I want to pose a couple of these, and I think they're more in Ames's area, but Michelle, you can weigh in too if it makes sense to do that. But the first is, are there any thoughts or examples on how gender at birth laws are affecting the legality of advanced directives? I think our lawyer can speak to that, Ames.
Yes, I will be giving you thoughts and reflections and not legal advice, alas. Perhaps I should have made that disclaimer earlier. Um, so I think this question is about a law that North Dakota passed last year that defines sex for the purposes of every law that's in your statutes as being the sex that you were assigned at birth. For one thing, let me say that advanced directives are not inherently gendered documents. So you aren't declaring or disclosing what your sex assigned at birth was versus what your current gender identity is. And mostly I have found that as these laws are rolling out, the vital, particularly vital statistics, so like they tend to be more focused on sort of the other end of the life spectrum. And there's like a lawsuit in Kansas right now around whether you can update the gender marker on your birth certificate. And I found that when we try to talk about death certificates or how disposition of remains and things like that to make sure that they're in accordance with gender identity, people are just not they're just not haven't even started to think about how those statutory definitions might apply. I don't think that there's anything in the statute itself setting forth advanced directives that's inherently gendered either. The things that we might need to think about are the lack of non-discrimination protections in North Dakota, and there begun to be some challenges in California, for example, about a challenge to a law that required long-term care workers to use the pronoun that someone identified with. So I think I I I don't think it's something that you necessarily need to plan for right now when you're completing an advanced directive. But things could always change. And if there's just over the last year and a half, the environment around laws that affect transgender and non-binary people has, this has really become an area of policy that has lots of fast moving parts. So you should always stay tuned. I don't think you necessarily, like I said, you don't have to have a lawyer. I want folks to feel empowered to go through these documents themselves and put them together. But you might have individual circumstances that might warrant having a lawyer to look over them. That's my 2 cents.
Michelle, you had something to add?
Yeah, really quick, and thank you, Ames, for that answer. I wanted to point out, based on what Ames just said, that the North Dakota Supreme Court Legal Self-Help Center, and I know Marnie's going to share this link with you in the email that comes out, has a document that you can use to create a healthcare directive and power of attorney on that website. And when we look to do, we're going to work with our partner Legal Services of North Dakota to do what we're calling POA days for right now, but really to raise education on creating a power of attorney and healthcare directive. And I did send the language that I received from Ames specific to LGBT populations so that when they do those days, they have that specific language that can be included in those documents. So what our goal is, when people come to those appointments, they will leave with created documents, notarized, signed, and sealed and delivered as they leave that facility or as wherever center they're holding it in. But to Ames's point, you do not need to have an attorney do it, and those forms are existing on a website. You may just want to consider adding the language that Ames referenced. And that's my addition.
Okay, well, thank you for those answers. We have two more questions here. So here's the first one. Since so much of the LGBTQ plus community lives in community with others, are there any legal challenges to the idea of having your advance directive decided by 2 or more people rather than an individual?
I have a thought. Michelle, I can answer it unless you want. Okay. I have 2 thoughts actually. There are definitely logistical considerations if you appoint more than one person as your healthcare agent, because you're going to have to decide who takes precedence when there's a disagreement between the 2 people. So for that reason, it's always discouraged that people that name more than one person. But I also acknowledging the like importance of community connections might alter the way that we think about those things. The law is based on this really individualistic, atomistic idea of single people. We also know that polyamorous relationships are a thing that are happening, and they're beginning to get legal recognition. And we will have to figure out how we account for those in a lot of different legal documents that involve estate planning. So I would say my answer to this is the same. Still under construction. Watch this space.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question in our queue here is regarding the LEI. Do you recommend how this can go forward? Will it take the leadership of government, um, NGOs, rather than depending upon the initiatives of individuals?
Thank you, Barry, for that softball question. The model of human rights campaigns indices, they're based on competition, honestly. So it generally is not they're not it would be unusual for a government to try to find a way to promote them, although I'm sure HRC would love that. I think the fact that, if you've looked at the corporate equality index, for example, before you go shopping, before the holidays, to find a company that is LGBTQ affirming, everybody, all the companies, all the Fortune 500 folks all want to get 100 on the corporate equality index because it sets them apart from their competitors who do not have all these presence at pride parades and all the other things. And the LEI is the same way. I think it might, even if we may be able to parlay some of the surrounding states that may have people involved in the LEI to try to show that it's happened in other states. And I know there are some really pro-LGBTQ healthcare providers who, might also be connected to long-term care. Just thinking about at the LGBTQIA2S plus summit that I attended in October, like there was a real presence from, for example, Sanford Health there. So that can be sort of a natural environment for healthcare and long-term care to feed off of each other. But also the importance is that the criteria will advance. Like if you get they're not numerically scored. So take this for what it's like. If you got 100, you knocked everything out of the park. You don't stay at 100. Like the whole point is to try to keep people, businesses, long-term care facilities who want to affirm LGBTQ people to continue pushing for more and more affirming policy. So it's still very much a baby. It took a number of years for the Healthcare Equality Index to take off. So we're excited to see where it'll go.
Great. Thank you for that answer. I want to open it up too. I do want to make a note. Doreen had posted here the legal self-help link to the North Dakota courts. And again, to reiterate that after this, you'll have a follow-up email and it will include a lot of the links we've talked about as well as others, plenty of resources coming your way. Is there anyone who has another question? Welcome any more questions or anything that Michelle or Ames you want to make sure we cover that you've remembered or been reminded of here.
I think Alan has a question.
Yeah, I'm going to post this. What's the status of sensitivity training, specifically in North Dakota and in general? Are there programs of sensitivity training to LGBTQIA workers for healthcare workers currently in place?
Boy, that's a hard question, Alan. I'm trying to think if I've had any or seen any recently. I mean, personally, I have. We just had a cross-cultural communication training today where he talked about looking through different lenses when communicating with individuals. That was not specific to LGBT plus individuals or populations or anything like that. It was more focused on how do you identify as an individual? So our speaker said, his primary identity was African American cisgender male, right? When he was presenting. But to your question, no, for state employees, I have not seen anything specifically for looking into training for sensitivity for LGBT plus. I can tell you, I should clarify a little bit. So my staff, Adult Protective Services staff, one of the staff groups that I oversee, I just finished a subject matter expert review of a training for our National Training Center for LGBT plus populations and how we can service plan with those individuals. So my staff will soon be taking that training as soon as it launches here in the next month. So my Adult Protective Services staff will have sensitivity training based on our National Training Center. So I can speak to that piece at least.
Oh, that's great. I like hearing that, Michelle. Are there any other questions out there?
I'll just jump on to the Barry, just to
Sure. Hi,
jump
Barry.
on. Hi, Marnie. Alan's question and Michelle, and this is not to put anybody's feet to fire at all, but I have from the very beginning in talking to Michelle and her staff with adult and older persons program, I found a real openness to looking for training opportunities for staff around the state, which would include and could include people within the state who have personal experiences, life experiences that could be put into the training of staff. I just want to say there's a real openness here that I think we need to make sure that we are able to walk through with resources locally. We don't have to be all professional trainers. I think we can all be helping with working together and providing this. I just feel like there's a real openness there. So let's work together on developing those trainings going forward. So I think it's a great question, Alan, and I just appreciate, Michelle, you and your program in being open to addressing that.
Thank you. Yes, and I would be happy to work with anyone that would like to coordinate a training like that for our staff. Actually, you know what? I just realized we had Faye Seidler come talk to us. And she was fantastic, and I heard such positive things. And so I have connected her to many people, and she's going to serve on a panel that I connected her to through one of our local hospitals. But yes, we did have training from Faye as soon as you said that, Barry, and it was fantastic. And I would love to have her come back again, but what a great connection to have with Faye. But yes, I would be willing to be anyone's contact for any kind of further training.
Faye is a super resource. I mean, she's just, I don't even know how she can know and do and engage in all the things she does. She's kind of a remarkable, yeah, she's remarkable. Any other questions or comments out there? As we always say at my church, this is more of a comment than a question. We'll take those too. All right. Well, oh,
I'd like,
please go ahead, Debbie.
just real quickly, I'd like to say that I agree 100% with Ames. You know, get it spelled out as to your advanced directives and all of that. Because I have mine done, and really, it does give you peace of mind to have everything spelled out, to pick your POA, somebody that you trust, and and your executor for your will and all that. But just do it. Don't delay, because we're not guaranteed tomorrow, basically. So yeah, get out there and get her done.
Debbie, our great cheerleader from the West. I appreciate that so much. That's a perfect segue to our closing. So thank you for that.
Yep.
Thank you, Ames and Michelle, so much. This was really informational, really great. I want to remind everyone that you'll get a follow-up email that will have resources and links and all of those things. I want to thank our collaborators today too. This event couldn't have taken place without the great ideas and the collaboration of the Red River Rainbow Seniors and the Missouri River Rainbow Seniors. I am just so grateful to be able to work with you, good folks, and come up with ideas of ways to approach things, information to share, ways to be in the world and to be allies in this community. It's a real joy of this work with AARP. I want to thank my colleague, Doreen Striley, behind the scenes. She's running those slides right now, making sure you know all the things in the background that we all need to know. We have upcoming events at AARP. You can find all that at aarp.org/ND events. In the weeks to come, we'll be coming out into the world a lot. We will be we've got shredding in April, we've got Stop the Scam lunches, and we'll also see you at Pride events and a lot of other things this summer. So I'm looking forward to that. So you'll get an email with the survey link. I'm just making sure I don't forget anything. And thanks again to Ames and Michelle. And when we stop the recording here, we will stay on for a few minutes. So if there's anyone who just really wasn't comfortable speaking up, we'll have that opportunity here momentarily when we stop the recording. But otherwise, thank you everyone for coming tonight. We've had a wonderful turnout. We appreciate you all. Thank you so much, and have